A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own.
There's many officers surrounding her. There's a nurse there, and she is manhandled physically violently to the ground in an operation they call a bend-up. Hands put violently behind her back, handcuffed very, very tightly, and she's then literally physically handcuffed in this bend-up where you're bent over, dragged up 3 flights of stairs into this new wing where she's thrown into almost effectively solitary confinement.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women,
and let's just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained.
Democracy is dead. Stone cold dead. The illusion of democracy is very much kept alive. We are being ruled by leaders who claim that they are democratic leaders, and they force us to play along with their games. In fact, many people do so happily. And that is what makes modern-day tyranny arguably worse than what we see in the history books. In the DDR, you at least knew that the government was listening in on you. In the USSR, you at least knew that going against the government could end you in the gulags. In Mao Zedong's China, going against the government was something that surely would have you met with violence. But make no mistake, being a dissident now is just as dangerous as it was back then. Our regime uses pretty words to hide their intentions, but they pervert and invert our definitions all the time. They say that to maintain peace in Europe, we need to go to war with Russia. They say that to protect democracy, we have to ban right-wing parties. And they say that to safeguard freedom of speech, they need to censor disinformation. Just like in Orwell's 1984, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
Okay, well here we are. This is the Isle of Islay, and that tiny little ferry there is for the Isle of Jura, and I need to find out how and what time you get on there tomorrow, because there's limited spaces to get on. Wow, we managed to get the last ferry across. What a nice man. You're supposed to book these ferries, but he's let us across anyway. So, they're the Paps of Jura over there. I have dreamt about coming over here now for the last 3-4 years. Because the motorhome that we got has got an overhang on the back and you can't get on this ferry. Look at this. Look at that. That is just absolutely awesome. There's Mandy. Well, the sun is out. The sky is blue. The sea is looking emerald green. I've got the Paps of Jura over on this side. We've got the village of Jura just down there. And we're about to do something that has been 4 years really in the planning, is to go as far north as we can, where the road runs out. We may have to walk the final 5 miles to go to the place where George Orwell wrote 1984. And you might be wondering, why come all this way to talk about 1984? Well, just come with us on this journey, friends, because not only does the book 1984 really explain the issues that we are facing today in our nation, and not just our nation, but in many nations in this world right now. Not only does it underline them and explain very clearly what's going on, I believe there is another book. It's not 1984, but there is another book that gives us the clear solution to the madness that we see right now. So, come with us on this journey. It's going to be beautiful. Hopefully my leg will hold out. Hopefully Mandy's toe will hold out. I have never walked this amount that we're going to walk since I've broken this leg. But hopefully it's going to be worth it. Folks, well, that is the worst public road I've ever been on in Great Britain. It actually made the roads in South Africa, the side roads, seem well maintained. It was absolutely shocking. I'll show you this just before we go any further. You see it says Barn Hill there? Barn Hill? Well, that's where the house is. You see it says 4 miles? Can you see what it says before the 4 miles? 1984 miles. Okay, I think we've come about half a mile, and there's nobody on this walk. As far as the eye can see, it's another twice that distance probably, and we get there. So we finally got to the place that George Orwell wrote 1984. The little white cottage in between Mandy and myself right now, that's that place. What are your initial impressions as to why he chose a place like this to write such a deeply depressing book, if we're honest?
There's nobody here for a start, and he came from London, didn't he, from the city?
Yeah.
So just a bit like any artist, you need the solitude. Plus he was recovering from TB or something like that, wasn't he? So he's very ill. And the clean air, I mean, the air is still perfectly clean here, isn't it?
It's incredible. I think this island will look exactly the same today as it did 75 years ago when he finished the book in 1949. When you come to a place like this, that's Orwell's cottage in the background there. We've just walked 4 miles. It's not easy. I mean, you've got a bad toe, haven't you?
Yeah, just
and I've not walked this far on this leg since I broke it, and we've got to get all the way back yet with a lot of weight as well. But he obviously, when you look at this, you look at the sea over there, the vast sea, looking out to the Isle of Islay. This place just kind of, it is peace, isn't it? If you could describe a peaceful place to be.
You've got to like your own company to like a place like this.
Oh, I like my own company.
I like my own company.
So, 1949, Orwell finished the book, very ill with TB, fighting for his life actually, but he managed to finish this book, nearly drowned at the very top of Jura here, the third largest whirlpool in the world. He tried to get a little rowing boat across to an island across there with one or two kids in there, I think one of his adopted sons or whatever, and the boat turned over. Absolutely crazy. But, you know, when you think about 1984 and you think about the slogans of Big Brother, the first slogan is "War is peace." The second slogan is
Freedom is slavery.
Freedom is slavery. And the third is ignorance is strength. Right. So I used to look at those slogans and think, he's gone too far there. Nobody is that stupid to believe that war is actually peace, that freedom is actually slavery, and ignorance is strength. And I kind of thought it was almost it just didn't work for me.
No.
Until you really get in your head the future that Orwell kind of saw in his mind's eye, is that the people in that future would wholeheartedly have to believe that war equals peace, that freedom is slavery, and that ignorance is strength. Not even to the point where they're saying they're lying just to get Big Brother off their back, but they would have to believe it with everything that they had. In fact, as you see in the film Big Brother, towards the very end, when the main character, Winston Smith, is taken to the Ministry of Love, he ends up looking at the posters and saying, "I love you, Big Brother. I love you, Big Brother. I love you, Big Brother," and everything that Big Brother stands for. So, why have we made this huge journey? Well, I think not just ourselves, but there are many people in Great Britain right now that are extremely worried about where this where this nation is heading, the direction that it's heading into. There's something in 1984 that's coined doublespeak. Doublespeak. Well, doublespeak is war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. That is doublespeak. But doublespeak has been around for a long time. You look in the prophet Isaiah chapter 5, when it says, "Woe to those who say, good is evil, evil is good, dark is light, and light is dark." That also is doublespeak. What many British people are beginning to wake up to is that not just Britain, but obviously many other countries as well, we are being conditioned to accept doublespeak, and have been, I believe, for the last almost 25 years. We have been told continually for almost 25 years that violence is peace and peace is violence. So in George Orwell's 1984, you have something called thought crime, that you can be arrested simply for thinking things against Big Brother. And just as you've got the brown coats with the Nazis, you've got these little kids in 1984 that are watching everywhere, watching people to see if there is a potential thought crime emerging. And so we had the ex-army soldier not that long ago that, well, I think it was about a year ago now, that prayed outside of an abortion clinic privately for 15 minutes, that was actually charged for praying outside of an abortion clinic for the preservation of life.
In his head, by the way.
In his head, never spoke a word out. Something, I believe we've had about 20 years of conditioning leading up to the last 4 or 5 years, where it's gone from conditioning to they're actually beginning to implement things now, which are extremely worrying. So we have journalists now that are beginning to wake up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware. They're beginning to wake up to what's happening, and their lives are being made an absolute misery. An absolute misery. And so you have to work out in all this, what on earth is the agenda for Great Britain? What is going on that these things are happening so quickly now? People are frightened. You know, in 1984, there's a room that Winston Smith is offered to use where there's no Big Brother monitor. And so he starts to take this girl there, and he's thinking that it's a safe place that Big Brother can't hear, when actually that room was a trap set up by the Ministry of Truth. Ultimately, there are traps everywhere in the book 1984. You think it's a place of freedom where they're just trying to figure you out as to what you stand for so that they can take you away for interrogation and then room 101. Are we beginning to realise that this freedom that we've had on social media now since what? Shall we say back to 2008, where the platforms really started to get good, may well be like the rooms in 1984 that have been set up to find out as much about us as they possibly can. I know that's really depressing, and that's not what we're about. And it's not what this video is about. This video is about 2 books. One is 1984, but there is another book, probably the least read, most purchased book of all time, that has the solution to all of these problems that we see right now, and there are solutions to these problems. The end of 1984 is so completely depressing because they break Winston Smith. They never wanted to make a martyr out of him. They never intended to do that. They simply intended to break him. And there's this picture in 1984 that they say the future looks like. It looks like a boot stamping on a man's head forever. And that, of course, is power. That's what they say real power looks like.
They're afraid of love. Because love makes a world they can't control. And it's a world worth taking risks for, isn't it?
Yes. We will lead you, step by step, to the point from which there is no return. Never again will you be capable of love or friendship, or joy of life, or laughter, or courage, or curiosity, or integrity. You will be hollow. We will squeeze you empty, and then we will fill you with ourselves, with love of Big Brother.
And so at the end, Winston Smith is a broken man. He's betrayed the girl of his dreams and finally realizes, and this is the key to this first video, that he must love Big Brother with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his strength, and with all his mind. And this is the key. This is the key. Let's go on. So here's the view right here that George Orwell had in 1949 while he was penning a book that talked about a potential future that was practically hopeless. And he did it from a place like this. I don't want to go too far over because there might be somebody there. I don't think there is. But it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And we just bumped into a family that have also done the same walk. It's a 5-mile walk right down to here. And he did that on his motorbike all the time.
And he would take, I mean, just to get to the shops is 25 miles from here over crazy terrain. Even for our Land Rover, it was really challenging. There is no way you could take a small boat across that. Not a chance. So this is about as remote as it's going to get. Anyway, I'm so glad we've come here. I'm so glad I've seen this place. You can see how it would make an incredible family home. Back then in 1949, there was just wood burners. It was very, very, very basic. You used to be able to rent this place out at one time, but those days have gone now. So he had no distractions, and he had all the time in the world to put together something that really must have taken some thinking about. I was just saying to Mandy, we've reached that stage now where it's actually, nobody knows anymore what a hate crime actually looks like. So I don't know if you've noticed, but people are beginning to be, they're not speaking as freely about their feelings as they used to do, maybe even just 5 years ago. People have been put in prison, they've been made an example of, and you have to ask the question, if this is left unchecked, where is this going to lead Great Britain to? So it is a beautiful property, but imagine that you're slowly dying of TB, your body's packing up, and the only thing you've got left to do in your life is write something. And I'm sure Orwell knew that at some point 1984 would become a reality. I'm sure he knew that. It was just a matter of time. The end of 1984 is probably one of the most depressing ends to any book. There is no hope, that's how it ends. Big Brother wins. Those that question Big Brother and question the ministry of truth and the ministry of love and the ministry of hate and doublespeak and thought crime eventually are going to end up being interrogated. And the idea, of course, in 1984 is that everybody gets ultimately converted. That's the sad reality of 1984. But that is not what history teaches. History teaches that very often in the darkest hour of any society, that's when the light shines the brightest. And even though in our country right now, there's this horrible sense that people are beginning to feel that they can't speak their own mind anymore, I can see just a few green shoots of hope of people that are beginning to talk, come together. And in terms of people that I know that are Christian people, it's causing them to get back to the core message of Christianity. And for me, that has to be a good thing. If everything that's gone on in our nation, particularly over the last 5 years since COVID, is causing people to revisit the core elements and the core values of the Christian faith, it has to be a good thing. Midnight is where the day begins, friends. And even though this land is getting very, very dark, the lamps that have always been there are beginning to shine brighter and brighter and brighter. And I've always said this, wherever there is a Jezebel, God will always raise up an Elijah. I can even see in my own home city of Stoke, I can see God beginning to raise people up for for this hour that we're in. And it's causing people to, I believe, seek out the core values of the Christian faith, both churchgoers, non-churchgoers, both born-again Christians and people that profess to be Christians that maybe are not Christian. They're beginning to look to the core values of the Christian faith and ask the question, and it's a really good question, what is it that has made this country so great over so many centuries? Remember, Christianity came to Great Britain in the 2nd century. Christianity came to Scotland in around 560 AD through Columba, who we're going to look at next. We're going to look at a man that gave everything that he had to make sure that that book, that shining light of a book that contains so much mercy, so much hope, so much truth, so much faith, and so much love, is handed from nation to nation to nation until we finally get to the end. So if this nation of ours is beginning to reflect what we see in 1984, the book, if it is that we are moving into this Orwellian, dystopian kind of age, if that's what it's going to take to cause people to relook at the Christian faith, to reopen the Bible, and maybe even start in Genesis, or at least go to the Gospels and see what is it that's made this country great for so many centuries, it has to be a good thing. So I don't know whether you've noticed, but as we've been looking at 1984, and there's so much more we could say about this book, we could talk about it for another half an hour, and maybe we should, but I want to begin to draw this part of the video to a conclusion. When you look at a book like 1984, in a way, it's just a kind of a microcosm of every evil dictator that has ever been, from Nimrod to the Pharaohs, from the Pharaohs to the Babylonian Empire, men like Nebuchadnezzar, from the Babylonians to the Medes and the Persians, from the Medes and the Persians to the Greek Empire, whether it be Alexander, Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes, whether it be the Romans, the Caesars, whether it be Nero, Domitian, Diocletian, whether it be the popes in the Middle Ages, they all demand this absolute loyalty and this unwavering love. All of them, they're all the same. It's really strange. They demand absolute loyalty and they demand that you love them. But this is where it gets really interesting. And you see it with men like Saddam Hussein, you see it with men like Stalin, you see it with men like Hitler, with Mussolini, with Idi Amin. The list goes on and on. Robert Mugabe. They all demand unwavering obedience and steadfast love, but they also all demand that you hate their enemies to the point where you report their enemies, where you imprison their enemies, and in many cases you kill their enemies. This is really important. What you see in 1984 with the thought police, even the kids getting involved, how they They desperately want to separate parents from children, where they want to brainwash the children into becoming part of the thought police, where everything is twisted. So the ministry of peace means war, the ministry of love means torture, the ministry of plenty means famine. We see these things time and time again right the way throughout history, and they all demand unwavering support, steadfast love. They demand that they are loved. But this is where I hope this comes across in this video. I hope you can get this. They all demand that you hate those that hate them, that you hate the enemies of their state, whether it be a religion or whether it be a dictator. It's always the same. You must hate those that hate them. You must report those that question them. You must imprison those that are in some way contradictory to their beliefs, and in many cases they demand for the death of those that don't follow the same narrative. Always the same, always incredibly predictable. Now here's the thing, friends. I just hope and pray that you will grasp this. In the Bible, there was a lawyer that came to Jesus, and he said to Jesus, "What is the greatest commandment?" In other words, what is the meaning of life? What is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said this: the greatest commandment is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. Now, in many ways, that isn't that different than what many world leaders have said about themselves. It isn't. It's the next part that sets Christianity apart from everything else. Jesus didn't just say that. And he said, and the second commandment is like it. He said this: you shall love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. Now, can you see how different this is from anything else? In other words, the second is intrinsically linked to it. If you love the God of love, then you will love your neighbor as yourself. This is revolutionary. There's never been anything like this. Well, later on in the Gospels, a man of the law, somebody that knows the scriptures, came to Jesus to trap him and asked him the same question: what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Do this and you will live. So the learned Bible teacher said to Jesus, well then, who is my neighbor? And Jesus gave this parable, and it's probably maybe even the most important parable of the New Testament, because it teaches us something so contrary to any other dictator, to any other regime, or any other faith. The man wants to know, well, who is my neighbor? Because, you know, I don't want this thing to be far-reaching. I can cope with loving people that are nice to me. So Jesus tells this parable of a man that was on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was set upon by a bunch of robbers. They beat him black and blue, and they left him half dead. So Jesus said this: a priest went by, completely ignored him. Now this is a man of the word, he's a man of the Bible that asked the question, who is my neighbor? In his mind, a priest is somebody to be looked up to, somebody who is righteous, high standing. And Jesus says the priest looked at this man and turned the other way. Later on, a Levite A Jewish person, a Levite, went past, also crossed the other side of the road, didn't want to know. And then he says this, then a certain Samaritan, he didn't say good Samaritan, he said a certain Samaritan. The Samaritans at that time were public enemy number one to the people of Israel. They hated the Samaritans. They would have nothing whatsoever to do with the Samaritans. They hadn't got a good word to say about the Samaritans at all. The answer that Jesus gives is like a double-edged sword. Number one, he shows this man that just because a person is a priest or a Levite, it doesn't mean that they're a good person. Number two, just because they're a Samaritan, the people that the Jews hated the most, they called them half-breeds and dogs. They wanted nothing to do with them. Jesus said this certain Samaritan was the one that actually looked after the man who had been fallen upon by the robbers, to the point where he took him to a hospital and paid the entire bill. And he says, if the bill goes past this point, the next time I come back, I'll pay the rest. It was absolutely startling. It would have floored this man of the law. He says, go and do these things. You do likewise. Why was Jesus saying this? Because this is what makes the Bible so completely different than any other book. God demands that we love him. Why? Because he first loved us. We'll get to that in a minute. Secondly, because we love the God of love, we will be like the God of love. We will love our neighbor. Well, who is our neighbor? Jesus said, anybody is your neighbor. Anybody could be your neighbor. Your neighbor isn't constrained to people that fit in with your ideology and fit in with your religion. This is what sets the Bible apart. This is what the Bible says. For God so loved the world. Jesus puts it, the Apostle Paul puts it like this. God demonstrated his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, in other words, while we were hostile to God, while we didn't want to know about God, while we were rebellious towards God, while we wouldn't go along with God's narrative and God's ways, he sent his only son to die in our place when we were in complete rebellion to him. His answer to our rebellion is absolute, undiluted love demonstrated by Jesus coming, living amongst us and dying the death that we should have died, accepting the punishment that was due to us, the innocent for the guilty. It is, folks, there is nothing like it. And when you look at in Big Brother and you look at the thought police, even the kids grassing up their parents because they may have thought something bad about Big Brother, or you think about people like Idi Amin or Robert Mugabe or Saddam Hussein or Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin, they're all the same. They demand love, but they demand that you report, imprison and kill those that don't go along with their agenda. Not the God of the Bible. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind and all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. It is revolutionary. It is a revolution. You know, friends, when I was a young man, maybe, I don't know, maybe I was 14, 15. I remember everybody used to watch Top of the Pops in Great Britain. It was a program about, you know, the songs that were the most popular at the time. And I remember this song coming on by a group called New Order. And New Order actually were a band only 8 miles from where I lived. They were quite a popular indie band and they were very respected. And they played this song on Top of the Pops that was just not typical of the stuff that was on Top of the Pops at the time. And the song was called Thieves Like Us. And I started to listen to it. I liked the bass line. I loved the way that they used to layer their synths. I liked the lead singer. I did like New Order. But this song was something completely different. And the chorus of the song was this. It's called Love. and it belongs to us. It's called love. And then all of the instruments drop. And he says, and it's so uncool. It's called love. And somehow it's become unmentionable. It's called love. And what I'm finding today, friends, is that love has been so scrambled in our head by this whole politically correct narrative that we've been sold. People don't know what love is anymore. But this is an emergency meeting right now. You know, the entire church, the country should be having an AGM right now because our country is about to go down the pan. And it's about to go down the pan because we have abandoned Christianity. We've abandoned the God of love. We've abandoned the God that inspired the abolition of the slave trade. Well, who is my neighbour? Your Africans, those that you're nailing to the floor in the ships, those that you're starving and treating like dogs, they are your neighbour. And people like William Wilberforce and John Newton caused a revolution to happen, the abolition of the slave trade. Why do you think these things happened? What about the Falkland War? When the Argentinians invaded the Falklands, which was part of the British Empire, what happened? I'll tell you what happened. You can go check this out for yourself. The British soldiers set up a massive hospital in the middle of it. Was a freezing cold place at the time, and it was being bombed all the time. And the policy was whoever came through those doors, whether it be an Argentinian soldier or whether it be a British soldier, the British did not take precedence over the enemy. When it came to being treated with an injury or a situation where they were about to die, whoever came through that door in the worst condition got the treatment. What possesses a nation to do something like that? It's called love. And it belongs to us. It's called love, and it's so uncool. It's called love, and somehow it's become unmentionable. But the God of the Bible is the God of love, and he told that man who said, "Who is my neighbour?" He mentioned somebody that he knew full well that man hated, the Samaritans. He said, they're your neighbour, as much as the priests and the Levites are your neighbour. They are as much your neighbour. Friends, the gospel is the only answer. Yes, 1984 is an incredible book. It really is, because it unfortunately shows us the direction that we're heading in, and it's not good at all. But we have to get back to what was rediscovered in the late 60s and early 70s in America. There was an outbreak of the love of God. They got back to it. They realized through the Vietnam War, through all the Cold Wars that were happening around the world, we have to rediscover the love of God. It's our only hope. And so here we are on the Isle of Jura. It's such a privilege to be here. I've wanted to come here for the last 3 years and do this video, but you know, in a way I'm glad we didn't, because things have escalated so much in the last 3 years in Britain. It makes more sense now than it would have done 3 years ago. Friends, it's time, and it's time for us, please hear me, to rediscover the basics of Christianity. And the basics of Christianity transform nations and make them into wonderful places. There are people in Britain right now that may not be Christians. They may not be born again. But there is something, what's happening in our country is so messing with their head that it's causing them to look at the basics of Christianity. What a time to live, friends. What a time to live. So I'm going to finish off with this. This is what Jesus said is the greatest command. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And he says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, in what way can we help to fulfill those two commands? There are many ways, and I could go on for another half an hour talking about these things right now. But I'll tell you this, if you really love God, if we really love God, and if we really love our neighbor, then we will tell people what God did by sending his only Son to die upon the cross in our place. It is God's message to the world. And if we love our neighbor, surely we should be sharing this incredible message of love. Every other regime, every other world dictator, and even religions, they all demand love. But if you don't go along with their narrative, they demand you to be an unperson, as it was in 1984. They demand that you be reported. They demand that you be imprisoned. They demand even your death. This is what the gospel says. God demonstrated his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
They're afraid of love. Because love makes a world they can't control. And it's a world worth taking risks for, isn't it?
Yes.
It's called
They're afraid of love. Because love makes a world they can't control. And it's a world worth taking risks for, isn't it?
Yes.